All right, here we go. This one's going to be a 357 sig test. Today we're going to be trying out some Underwood ammo. So for the first one, that one is the 115 grain Nosler. Here's what that thing looks like. It does have your nickel-plated brass and is rated 1,550 feet per second. And for other one, that one is the 124 grain Nosler. That one was actually sent to us by Mr. Joe Jones. So thank you, sir. Appreciate you. Here's what that one looks like. That one also has your nickel-plated brass, and that one's rated 1,475 feet per second. So we'll see how close we come today. So we are going to be testing out of our Glock 32. I did ask you guys just to see what you wanted to, see it out of the most, and this was number one. So of course we will test it out of the shorter barrel, longer barrel, all that good stuff. But for now, we're going to try it out this 32. So that one does have that 4-inch barrel, and we'll be going through our gel. Those are 10% calibrated blocks. Do over a catch block behind that, so a total 22 inches of gel, 4 layers of cotton t-shirt on the front, and like always, we'll set up our chronograph so we can hopefully pick up those impact velocities. So let's set up and see how these rounds do. Head to head, first one up will be at 115 grain. All right, we're setting back to 15 feet. All right, let's see how we did on that one. That thing was extremely loud. All right, so it looks like our impact velocity on that one was 1509, so definitely good to see. That was a 4-inch barrel, not that full size 4.5. So I'm sure if we did, the full size, would get that full, rate of velocity, but still very good to see for sure. All right, and there's that hit. Looks like I got a pretty good shot on that block. See right down in there, and a ton of damage so far. You can see big chunks of lead, and I'm pretty sure we have a blowout here on the side, but let's check it out from the top. Oh yeah, definitely a ton of damage. Like I said, you can see a pretty large blowout there, but that's okay. Man, we got a ton of damage. You see that thing pretty much came in and exploded. You can see big chunks of lead and petals coming off. It did settle down pretty quick. It looked like it dumped its energy pretty quick. And they start to flatline, and we did just barely make it into that second block, so that's always good to see. So let's see what kind of measurement we have here from the top. Like we always do, we'll get our more accurate cross sections here at the end, but at our widest spot, we're at 3 1/4 inches, and if we're counting this, excuse me, kind of pedal that's coming off, we are at 3 3/4, so definitely quite a bit. And I was just testing some 9mm right before this, and man, this one was way louder. But you can see that thing came in, absolutely exploded in there. You can see some huge chunks of, bullets shearing off. But man, it did settle down very quickly, dumping its energy very fast. But it looks like there is a frag all the way through that track, and then you can see that bullet there in that second block, just barely. So at our widest spot, not including that pedal that's kind of towards the bottom of that table, we are at 3 1/2 inches, and if we are measuring that, we are definitely at a little bit more, right around that 4-inch mark. So that is a ton of damage for sure. Definitely wasn't expecting those numbers, even though that is a 4-inch barrel, they usually rate it out of a little bit longer, but man, that's a ton of damage. And then that bullet is facing downward, and our leading edge, we were right at 1 inch, so that only made it a total of 12 inches of penetration. Definitely not the most, but man, with that amount of damage, you definitely don't need that much. So let's set it for that 124 and see how that one does. All right, we're still back to 15 feet. let's see how we did on that one. Once again, that thing was extremely loud. All right, and our impact velocity on that one was 1483, so that is awesome to see. Rated was 1475, so anything that exceeds that is always great. Definitely wasn't expecting that, but that's awesome to see for sure. All right, and there's that entry. Looks like I got another perfect shot on that block. You can see right down in there and another huge star pattern. So let's check it out from the top. Oh yeah, definitely some good stuff. So it looks like as soon as that one came in, it exploded as well. We got a ton of frag in there. Once again, this one's almost like that last one where it started to settle down pretty quickly. It's dumping its energy very fast in that block. We did flatline a little bit towards the end, and we did make it into that second block. So let's see what kind of measurement we have here from the top. Looks like we did not get a blowout this time, so that's definitely good. And at our widest spot, looks like we actually have a little bit more damage. Looks like we were about 4 1/4 inches, so it's definitely a little bit more than that first one, but man, that stuff is nasty for sure. That's probably one of my favorite loads that they ever did was, the 124 grain Nosler. Of course, my, all-time favorite's HST. It's just super consistent, always, holds together, does what it does, but man, this is some nasty stuff for sure. But you can see it came in, absolutely exploded. You can see huge chunks of lead in there going all over the place. And then, it did settle down that last couple inches, maybe last 2 inches or so. And then we did make it a decent way into that second block. So definitely some good stuff. So let's see what kind of measurement we have here from the side. At our widest spot, we are at just about 3.5 inches. So a little bit less from the side than the top, but definitely, still very good. It actually does look like we did get a blowout here on the top. Not on the side this time, but a little bit on the top. But that is okay. And then that one is right there. Hopefully you guys can see it is facing upward. And our leading edge there, we're at 2 3/4 inches. So that one made it a total of 13 3/4 inches of penetration, which is definitely very good. So we'll check them out one time from the top. So the one on the right was that first shot, one on the left was that second shot. So here's that first shot, that 115 grain. You can see it came in, exploded in there, getting a ton of damage. Really messing that gel up. You can see it did flatline very quickly though. And then, it's still going, and we barely made it into that second block right there. And same thing with this one. Came in, exploded in there once again, dumping a ton of energy, ton of frag. And then, after that maybe 7-inch mark, it did start to settle down a little bit, start to flatline. And that one also made it into that second block. Definitely some great stuff. But let's pull these rounds and see what they look like. All right, check these things out. Looks like they both got some awesome expansion. So one on the right was at 115 grain, and one on the left was at 124 grain. So here's that 115 grain. You can see it got some perfect mushrooming, pulled that thing right back. Of course, it did peel all those petals off, but still did very good. Looks like there's one kind of hanging on, peeled right over the base. There's still a ton of gel left in this thing, but man, that definitely opened up very nicely. Normally when I test these two, they usually completely come apart, so it's good that it held together a little bit at least. And here's that second one, that's at 124. Same thing though, man. Perfect mushrooming, opened up really nice. And I believe this one, yeah, this one ripped every one of the petals. Sorry guys, stuff's slippery with all that gel, but it peeled all those petals off. They are all in the block. Once again, a lot more gel. We'll rinse all this stuff here at the end, but definitely one wicked round for sure. Almost 1,500 feet per second with 124 grain is, moving right at that 357 Magnum level. And really good to see. So we'll check them out one time from the bottom. So one on the right was at 115, one on the left was at 124. And last time from the top. So like I always do, we'll, pull this frag out, get weight retention, steel shots, all that good stuff. But there we go, guys. That one was the Underwood Nosler 115 versus 124. And once again, thank you, Mr. Joe Jones, for sending that 124. That's some wicked stuff for sure. Thanks again for watching, guys. All right, so there's that cross section for that 115 grain. You can see we have some pretty massive damage going on. This stuff is really barely hanging on. You can see a couple of petals down in there, but man, that is some pretty crazy stuff. I've said it before and I'll say it again. At the velocity, these basically look like rifle rounds coming in and just creating a ton of damage. And like we mentioned out in the field, that thing was extremely loud. We were testing 9mm right before it, and then just jumping right to 357 sig, so you could definitely tell a difference. It was quite, it was quite a bit louder for sure. So we did pull out a couple pedals already, but there is quite a bit more down in there. Like always, we'll get all our retained weights and stuff here at the end, but just a crazy amount of damage. And so the splits, so we did remeasure these. They are peaking right at 4 1/4 and averaging right around that 3 3/4 inch mark. So definitely, very impressive and just a massive amount of damage. So really good to see there. And that one was moving over 1,500 feet per second. So that is very impressive as well. So let's cut it open. All right, and here's after being cut. So this bottom is the right side and this top is the left. So you can see right around that 1/4 inch mark where it started to open up or, explode. And just really did a ton of damage. You could see that stuff was really barely hanging on. Tore a nice big canyon down in there. And just some really, really big splitting for sure. This stuff is pretty crazy, the amount of damage that's going on. Same on the top, came in, opened up. You can see that huge path going all the way through. This side did drag in a little bit of that cotton t-shirt, but it definitely didn't slow it down. And you can see a little bit more of that lead. This thing did frag like crazy, of course. It was moving, over 1,500 feet per second. Definitely wasn't rated, 1,550, but still anything over 1,400 really for 357 sig is super impressive. Even for that little bit lighter for caliber stuff. But pretty crazy stuff. See if we can get one more quick angle, because this stuff was very nasty. And lately Underwood's been hit and miss. I'm not the biggest fan anymore. I used to be a huge fan, but I've been having some problems with them with customer service and quality control and all that. So I'm probably not going to be purchasing any more Underwood. But their stuff that they were making before is very impressive. But you can see right there, look at that damage, man. That is insane. Crazy stuff for sure. Definitely wouldn't want to be on the receiving end of that one. It's massive trauma. And you can see that stuff's barely hanging on right there. But once again, that one was that 115 grain Nosler. All right, and here's that cross section for that 124 grain. So this one pretty much did exactly the same. Ton of damage going on. You can see that stuff is really barely hanging on. And every time I've tested this, no matter what barrel length, it produces just a ton of damage. You can definitely see a little bit of those petals down in there. But just a wicked looking wound for sure. Huge splitting. So I did remeasure these. They are peaking right around that 4 inch and averaging right around that 3 3/4. So pretty much exactly the same as that 115 grain. And this one definitely hit advertised velocity. I believe it was 1483, rated and advertised 1475. So definitely good to see out of that 4 inch barrel. So let's cut it open. All right, and here's after being cut. So this bottom is the right side and this top is the left. So pretty much same as that last one, right around that 1/4 inch mark where it started to open up or explode. And just, check that damage out. This stuff literally just came apart. It was not holding up anymore, but you can see a little bit of those copper petals. Huge channel going all the way through and just some massive splitting. This one did drag in a little bit of that cotton t-shirt, but this stuff is always impressive. I believe I mentioned before, it's probably one of my favorite rounds that, Underwood ever loaded and they ever made for 357 sig. I'm a huge fan of the HST, that's probably my #1 rated, but this is, they're pretty much neck and neck for me. This stuff is just nasty. But you can see same thing up here, came in, exploded, creating a ton of damage. Huge chunks of lead and copper going through there. And just dragging it all the way through that track. I did pull out quite a bit of frag too, but pretty nasty stuff. And this one was just as loud as that 115 grain. And nice stout recoil, which is always good. Let's see if we can do one more quick angle. Like I said, this bottom piece is barely hanging on, but you can see just a massive amount of damage. Huge splits. Basically comes in and it turns this stuff inside out. Just with the crazy velocity and explosive power of that round. But same on this side. Like I said, it's not hanging on anymore. But pretty impressive stuff. So there we go, guys. That one was that 124 grain Nosler. Once again, thank you, Mr. Joe Jones, for sending this stuff out. Really appreciate you. And, plenty more to come. Thanks again, guys.